are. Hello, everybody. Hope you are all safe. I am Tanaya back again, and this is the sixth session as a part of the series of conversations brought to you by Team Credit. We are indeed going through very, very difficult times, very, very tough times. The pandemic is wreaking havoc all around us. Some of us are fighting the virus ourselves, and some of us are taking care of our near and dear ones, our friends, our family members. Tough times indeed. And there is a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear around. Uh, Amidst all this, we are also seeing two basic human behaviors on display. On one side, we are seeing a huge amount of competition going on, wherein people are using their resources, their money, their influence, their power to hoard resources such as medicines, oxygen cylinders, hospital beds, etc. And on another side, we are seeing a lot of collaboration, a lot of compassion, wherein complete strangers are coming together, helping each other out. So on one side, we are seeing competition, and on another side, we are seeing collaboration. We at Team Credit thought maybe it's the right time to talk about these basic human behaviors, and that is why the topic for today's discussion is from competition to collaboration, our way forward. We intend to explore both these approaches, both these mindsets, and we intend to delve a little deeper, reflect, and try to understand how both these behaviors, how both these approaches, mindsets impact us, impact our life and growth. To engage in a conversation today, I have with me my fellow team member, Mr. Surya Prakash Mahapatra. May I please have him on screen? Yes, right there on your screen, you are seeing Mr. Surya Prakash Mahapatra. He's a familiar face by now in our travel Facebook page. You would have seen a couple of his videos posted in our Facebook page. You would have seen him anchoring one of our sessions a couple of months back. So Mr. Mahapatra is a senior corporate leader, and he specializes in the field of learning and development. So both of us are looking forward to engage in a conversation today. And we do request our audience who have joined us today to engage with us through the chat option. Post in your thoughts, perspectives, ideas, suggestions in the form of your comments and make our conversation richer. Thank you all for joining in, and we do look forward to your support as we move ahead with our conversation. So from the primitive times, we have seen animals, different creatures, and even human beings compete with each other. And this competition is for different resources, basic needs such as shelter, food, mates, and whatnot. I'm sure that there is a psychology behind competition. There must be a need, a basic need from play on why actually we compete with each other. So we thought we might delve on this.
Absolutely, Tana. You have brought up a very, very important, very pertinent point, the psychology of competition. What really drives competition? What drives this spirit of competition? I think if you go back and dive deeper into it, we come across a few things. I think some of the reasons are, first and foremost, could be a real threat or a perceived threat. You know, when human beings believe that there is a threat, they see a real threat, or they perceive for whatever reasons that they're facing a threat, they tend to ignite their fighting spirit, the competitive spirit, and they kind of try and compete. I think there was an experiment done by a very famous personality who put about 100 black ants and about 100 red ants in a jar, and he just left the jar there, and those ants were inside there. Everything was normal. After a few minutes, he picked it up and then he shook the jar. And you know what happened thereafter? The black ones started attacking the red ones, and the red ones started attacking the black ones, almost destroying each other. And why this happened? The red ants believe that the black ones are really the threat, and the black ones believe that the red ones are the threat. But it's a perceived threat. There was no real threat, or the real threat was somebody else. And they were oblivious of the fact that is the person who's shaking the jar is actually the threat, not the other species of ants. So this is an example of a perceived threat. Sometimes there is a real scarcity or a perceived scarcity of resources. When human beings believe that they don't have enough resources, the quantum of resources available is limited, and when they're driven by belief that they have to compete to have their share of the resources, they start fighting, they start competing. So if you look at these two examples, the underlying fact is, it's your awareness or the ignorance. And sometimes I think it's the awareness, it's the lack of awareness, or is the ignorance that there is no threat. Is the threat is just a perception. There is no scarcity of resources. If you look at this universe is a representation of a vast expanse. It's a representation of abundance. So the reality is there is plenty for everyone, but it's a perceived scarcity that plays up in the mind. That is the psychology of competition. And the fact of the matter is, while human beings have competitive spirit, they also have a collaborative spirit. But the fact is, which spirit we ignite the most. I think we need to go back to childhood, and then we'll have to recall the experiences that we go through. Most of the parents encourage their children to compete. They draw comparisons between the siblings. They draw comparisons between their children and the children of their friends or their neighbors. And they kind of put pressure on them to compete and be the best, and at the cost of their fellow friends or classmates, playmates, and so on. And when that spirit is ignited from the childhood, and when the child grows up into adolescence, grows up into adulthood, by then it has already become a second nature. So competition has become a second nature. So in every aspect of life, when he or she joins the corporate, an organization, gets into business, he or she continues with the belief that you have to compete to succeed. You have to compete to get your dues. You have to compete to get what you aspire to get. That continues. But having said that, competition also has its merits. It has its advantages. All of us know competition drives excellence, innovation, creativity, and so on. What do you think about it, Tanaya?
Yeah, definitely competition is good to an extent, yes. And as a consumer, obviously, I would like the companies from which I consume products, I consume services to really compete because that is when the prices in the market come down and I get the benefit out of it. But that apart, right, I will talk about my personal observations with respect to competition. I have observed that whenever we are looking at short-term outcomes, short-term goals, then competition really helps. For example, say I want to get good marks in a particular examination. So I study hard and put that effort, maybe burn the midnight oil, and I eventually end up getting those marks. Say I want to win a match in a sporting event. So I train harder, practice, and then I eventually win that match. So whenever short-term goals are there, at that time competition really pushes me to put in that efforts, and which in turn helps me achieve those outcomes. And I will try to explain that with an example. So very recently in our team, maybe a couple of months back, when the pandemic was really looked like it was ebbing. So we did a step-a-thon. We thought that since we are all at home and we are not really putting efforts to maintain our health, so it is a good idea as a team to do a step-a-thon. Step-a-thon is a challenge wherein everybody, all of us, walk together, compete against each other, and whoever has the highest number of steps eventually wins. So we did that, and what we observed that, and it ran for 1 month for our team. So while that stepathon was in progress, we found that all of us, we were putting 10,000, 20,000 steps per day, and we were competing, charging our teams up. And that went on for 1 month. But the strange thing which we observed is that right after the stepathon ended, we were back to our original self. We were not walking. So, which makes me believe that maybe because competition, I would say, and the rewards associated with it is extrinsic in nature, is external. That works when short-term goals are there. And that is what worked in that stepathon for us. But if we are looking at a long-term behavior change or excellence for that matter, then maybe it is not the right approach. And that is where intrinsic motivation has to come from within us for us to achieve those goals. Again, another thing where competition I think is good is wherein we see that we are focused on our own self. We are not really concerned about what people around us are doing in the form of, we are not trying to compare ourselves, as you are mentioning when we were talking about the psychology of competition. That sometimes it's all because we are looking at relativity, we are looking at comparisons. So when we are not really bothered about comparisons, but focused on our own growth, how I can enhance my skills, my competencies, how I can make myself better. And if I'm competing with my own self, that is when I think that self competition is good. And it definitely drives us towards excellence. And competition, yes, as you also told, it gives us a high. Okay, and there's a reward center, they say in our brain, and it gets stimulated when we compete, we win, and that actually gives us that high to move on and go. So that's what my thoughts are. And again, meaning both of us, we work in the corporate sector and see the competitive environment that is there, which exists and which sometimes impacts us. You yourself, have worked in multiple organizations, Mr. Mahabharata, and I'm sure you have observed it yourself at the workplace.
Oh, yes, that's right. So competition is an integral part of the business world, the corporate world today. And as you rightly said, you gave a few examples, and then competition has driven innovation, creativity, and ultimately competition also has helped the consumers and the customers benefit. But at the same time, competition also has taken an ugly turn in the business world, in the corporate world. I'll give you an example. The pharmaceutical companies, when they try to invent a drug, each one of them spends millions of dollars to invent the drug, and each one of them tries to be the first one to invent it. The first one, so that nobody else can invent it before they do. And the fundamental thinking behind this is our investment, the investment that we are making should become fruitful. The investments that others are making should go waste because we are the ones who should be the first one to invent the drug. This is a very unfortunate instance or example of competition, how sometimes it can lead to wastage of resources, human capital, time, effort, and all of that. And unfortunately, we see that in corporates as well. And most of the leaders today complain that their team members don't collaborate. The teams do not collaborate with each other. Very common thing that you hear in corporates is teams on and individuals are working in silos. They're not working as teams, as cohesive units. These are the pitfalls of competitions, the negative side of competition. And some of these are driven by the aspiration to be the best at the cost of others. I think you gave a great example. You talked about how do I compete with myself? How can we have have a competitive environment where competition drives excellence in every competitor, right? So it's not win and lose. It's not you versus me. Well, while each one of us are trying to achieve excellence, but in the end, everybody becomes a better version of what he or she was. I think competition, healthy competition of that nature is valuable. But a competition which is me versus others, and then there is only one winner, that can be dreadful and damaging. And when you look at corporates, Tanaya, today, some of our policies and organizations are not very conducive for collaboration. They actually foster cutthroat competition, which is unfortunate. When you look at the performance management system, if you look at the bell curve, which is prevalent in some of the organizations, if you look at the reward and recognition policy, a reward always, always an award is given to an achiever. But do organizations ever give an award to a collaborator? To somebody who has made others successful? They reward people who have become successful themselves. But how about rewarding people who help others to become successful? How do you really drive that culture? Our policies, our reward and recognition mechanism, even the metrics. Sometimes the metrics also drive performance. And there is a very common thing that you hear in the corporates, which is what gets measured gets done. So sometimes people are driven by measurements, metrics, KPIs, and but those KPIs are for the external world. But what about the innate desire for excellence? What about the passion for excellence? I remember a very interesting story. A few German tourists were touring different places in India, and they were visiting a temple under construction, and there was an artisan who was actually making a statue. And when they came near him, they found that he's making a statue, and exactly a very similar looking statue is lying next to the statue that he is making. And they asked him, do you need two statues of the same type? He said, no, I only need one. But they asked, but you are making a second one. You already have one. He said, no, it has a defect. He said, it has a defect? What defect it has? It said, there's a small defect in its nose. The tourist asked, where are you going to place this statue? The artisan said, I'm going to put it on this pillar, which is 40 feet high. The tourists were surprised. They said, a statue? You're going to put it on 40 feet high, which has a small dent in the nose. Who is going to notice this? The artisan said, I will notice it. I know that it has a defect. This is passion for excellence. But when you are driven by external metrics, measurements, KPIs, all your efforts are to make the KPIs look good. What about your inner passion for excellence? I think that's which is the crux of the problem in corporates today. I think we'll talk probably more about it, how to deal with this. but I just want to kind of give you a brief narrative about what's happening in the in the corporate world from competition and collaboration perspective.
Absolutely. And what a brilliant story that is when the artisan is saying that I will notice this. So he is clearly the competition is with self. And as you said,
Absolutely.
KPIs, matrices, parameters, goals that they're chasing sometimes in the corporate, it is these are all external parameters. And the motivation which it creates in us, as I said earlier, these are all extrinsic in nature. But when we are competing with ourselves, like that artisan was doing, it is a intrinsic motivation, and intrinsic motivation always stays ahead than extrinsic motivation, and that is what helps us get excellence, derive happiness, and that is where the zone of creativity lies, right? The intrinsic motivation that we talk about. And yes, you talked about collaboration. Certainly, I think in the corporate, in any organizations, collaboration is the way forward. We should get together as a team, diverse teams, help each other out, pull each other up, and look at team level goals, organization level goals, and that's where the winning becomes more meaningful. Now, I would at this stage I would like to give a small example that I came across, and that is from the arena of sports. So there is this 100-meter race, right? And we know Usain Bolt, he has a record in his name for 100-meter race, and the timing which he had, which is the world record currently, is I think somewhere around 9.68 seconds for the 100-meter race. Now, there is another version of the race, which is a 100 into 4 relay race, wherein there are 4 team members who run past the baton and then they run. And so the world record in this race is 36.84 seconds. Now, if you divide it by 4, because there are 4 team members and 100 into 4 meter we are talking about, you will see that the timing, average timing comes to 9.21 seconds, which is clearly better than the world record of 9.68 seconds, which means, and I'm just trying to draw the sense from there, that when we compete, when we collaborate and when we work together as a team, we get better outcomes. And I myself, have seen it in organizations that collaboration definitely helps and there are 2 ways in which we grow. And you mentioned about it, Mr. Mahar. One is when you compete with yourself, invest in yourself, try to continuously put in efforts for bettering your skills and competencies. And the other way is by pulling people down. Okay, so when you pull people down, naturally you create a perception that you are at a higher pedestal, you are better than them. Now, this is an easier route to take, making other people feeling smaller before the leadership or whatever. And that is what unfortunately some people take. If they shift their focus from pulling people down to pulling people out and pulling people up and collaborating, and rather investing on their self, their growth, their enhancement of their skills, I think it becomes all the more meaningful and beautiful. So 2 perspectives here on how we can collaborate better in organizations, and it's purely I'm telling based on my experience with working across teams, with teams, building teams. One is clearly setting off team level objectives and calculating those team level objectives to individuals, and inspire the team, motivate the team to achieve those team level objectives rather than individual objectives. And as you said that, in the organizations today, we do not see rewards and recognition which are acknowledging the collaborative style of working. We are not getting recognized for making somebody else successful. So even we have to relook at our policies and the rewards and recognition mechanism. And another thing which is very, very effective, I personally practice it, and I tell my team members also to practice it, is changing our lens. And what I mean by this is many times I have seen, be it in organizations, be it in our own life in society, what we see is that we are constantly judging people. We are forming opinions about people around us. Okay? The moment, and many times we form these opinions based on the biases, the unconscious biases that we have. Now, the moment we change our lens and we focus on the strengths of an individual, the good in a particular individual, the value that team member or individual is bringing to the table, uh, it becomes so easy to collaborate. Very recently, right, two of my team members, okay, they came to me separately, and they were at conflict. They were not able to work with each other. And this is the message I precisely gave them: that change your lens, try to look at the strengths of the other person. And I gave them a goal that please try to make the other person successful. And it worked. And I'm talking about it, and that is why so vehemently. And this is, as I said, I practice it very, very consciously. And this is because of my spiritual master, Sri Sri Thakur, who always says that trying to see the good in things around. And I'm just trying to find the message verbatim. That at first try, and he says about that message in his holy book, Satyanusaran, and we have spoken about the book in other sessions of Cradle as well. He says, at first try with all your might to find good in what you see and breed this habit in your very bones. He says that whenever the tendency grows to see another's fault, uh, be assured that this fault has made its home in you. And without delay, whenever you realize it, try to drive away, sweep away that very tendency. And you are also able to see on your screen this very message, which is very, very close to my heart. And I try to practice it myself. That if our eyes are only searching, Sri Thakur says, for people's evil, the evil in other person, we will never be able to love anybody. And let us be assured that it is love, it is compassion, which is the basis, which forms the basis of collaboration. And another thing which Sri Thakur says, and which I think is very, very relevant when we talk about collaboration, when we talk about working in teams, is trying to give to others as you desire to give. I desire to be treated with respect. I desire to be treated with love. It is important for me to, to try to give the same amount of respect, love, compassion to people around me. Love begets love. Respect begets respect. And I think that is at the heart of collaboration as I see it. Uh, but you know what, Mr. Mahapatra? All these things are easier said than done. Uh, in smaller pockets, we are seeing the success wherever we are able to implement. But my experience, based on my experience, I can tell you that on the ground, how much ever we talk about this, how much ever I scream at the top of my voice that this is the way forward, but it is very, very difficult, very, very difficult to follow it on the ground. So, what are your observations on this?
Of course, it is easier said than done. And millions of cigarette packets in India have one tagline written on them: "Smoking is injurious to health." But how many people actually give up smoking? So, of course, it is easier. A tagline is easier to pronounce, to state, but practicing is different. But the question is, how does behavior change happen? And especially the behaviors which have been ingrained in us right from our childhood, behaviors which have almost become second nature. How is this going to change? Corporates sometimes act in a very foolish manner when they spend millions of dollars in bringing external consultants to train their employees on how to collaborate. Well, these are, if you have to encourage the behavior of collaboration, you'll have to understand that these have to be driven by, I think, what you said earlier, Tanya, is an intrinsic motivation. Motivation, what really motivates me to collaborate? I think that's the key. So the motivation, if it is extrinsic, it's going to be reward or punishment. But if it is intrinsic, then these have to be driven by my values, by my beliefs, by my thoughts, my conviction, my commitment. If I don't inculcate those values and beliefs, if we don't strike at the roots, no matter whatever, how many cosmetic changes that we try to do to get people to collaborate, it'll only be short-lived. It'll not have a long-standing impact. I think the bottom line is, I think what you said, I think you talked about some of the very fundamental beliefs that Sri Thakur and Kulchandra talked about. And he has said that look at the good of others in everything they do. And important thing that he has said is breed this habit in your very bones. That's all about internalization. Breed it in your very bones. Make it part of your living entity. Make it, that has to become your second nature. So while today people spontaneously compete, as we say, fight or flight, but can we get people to spontaneously collaborate? Then we'll have to look at the beliefs, the values. So I think we'll have to operate not at a knowledge level, but at a wisdom level. Knowing is knowledge. Smoking is injurious to health is knowledge. But having the wisdom to give up smoking, having the demonstrating the ability, inculcating the values and beliefs and conviction that you should give up smoking is wisdom. I know that when I'm driving, I should not jump the signal. That is knowledge. But when I'm driving, if I see cops are not there, and if I kind of get past, so my knowledge has no value, no meaning, because what I lack is wisdom. And Sri Thakur Anukul Chandra says, what is gained through realization is wisdom. So we need to gain that realization. To gain that realization, to gain those values and beliefs, we need to be attached to a realized man. It's as simple as that. We need to have that realized man in our life who is the most evolved and reformed personality. Wisdom comes by attaching oneself to the realized personality, the living ideal, or the true life teacher, the master in life. And fundamentally, what drives beliefs, values, commitment, conviction is a very simple word which is called attachment. If one is attached to a love center, one can do anything. The very famous Nobel laureate Alexis Carrel says, a man will never sacrifice his life for an idea. A man will not sacrifice his life for a set of laws and regulations. But a man can sacrifice his life for a higher ideal, for his or her master, for somebody that he or she is attached to. But the person that he or she is attached to has to be a man of realization, the most evolved, most realized personality. Corporates don't understand this. Business leaders don't understand this because they believe if they make cosmetic changes, if they bring in reward and recognition, or if they bring in carrot and stick, it's going to work. But as you said, Tanya, I think you gave the example of the stepathon. That was a carrot, and motivation died down when the carrot went away. So these are all external, extrinsic motivations. But until and unless people believe that everybody else around them is an extension of their own being, there is no collaboration going to happen. Because the moment I see the other person as a different entity from me, then I'm always going to compete. But the moment I see that other person is an extension of myself, and that is possible when both of us are attached to a common ideal. That is possible. I think these are very deep-rooted philosophies, but Many of our business leaders might take years to understand this, but as Sri Thakur and Kul Chandra says, the shortest path, no matter how long and hard it is always the path of the truth.
Absolutely. So what you are trying to say is that yes, it is difficult on the ground to collaborate because of so many factors, right? But the moment we attach ourselves to a living ideal and we have a common ideal, and because of the common ideal, we are able to see people around us as extension of my own self, my own very being. It becomes so easier to collaborate. And yes, Sri Thakur has always taught us about this ideal centricity, and and there's a very common saying which we all talk about, that you are for the Lord and not for others. You are for the Lord and so for others. I think this is precisely that. The moment you are attached to a spiritual master, and that spiritual master, or in common parlance, guru, a guru is at the center of your life, is at the center of your very being. And through your guru, you are connected with others, and you make your guru the center of your life. And this very attachment, when it is very, very strong, and you feel your entire life is for your guru, and that is how, through your guru or master, you get connected to people around you. And that is what he means by so for others, right? So very, very, intense thoughts out there, Mr. Mahapatra. And I really liked when he said the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And that is what I think people like us fail to understand sometimes. We confuse knowledge for wisdom. We are gathering information, and now with Google being there for everything, we are searching and we have hordes of information, right? It's click away, or the repository of information, but then we are confusing that for wisdom, and that's the misfortune which we all have. So now we talked about collaboration as a way of life, and we talked about collaboration precisely from an organization point of view, right? In organization, how we can collaborate with each other, why it doesn't work, and how we can actually make it work. I'd like to delve a little deeper in the subject, and would want to understand how we can extend the concepts, the spirit of collaboration to the society at large. And I'm sure the very concept would not change, but maybe we can delve a little deeper and understand and reflect better on the subject.
Absolutely. I think since we have already looked at a few messages from our spiritual guides, Sri Thakur and Kul Chandra, I think the same vein, I would like to quote him again. He says something very powerful in this context. He said, the moment I say day, it presupposes the existence of night. The moment I say light, it presupposes the existence of darkness. Light would has its value because of darkness, because darkness exists. And we know that when light comes, darkness disappears. So had there not been anything called darkness, we wouldn't have valued light as much we value it today. He's saying, the moment I say I, it presupposes the existence of others. I have no meaning if I don't have others around me. My interest lies in the interests of others. So that's a very, very powerful, fundamental thing. And if we realize this, if we understand this fundamental thing, then I think we won't have to teach our people, our children, our friends and colleagues in our societies on how to collaborate. I just want to quickly share with you a message of Sri Thakur, which is very pertinent in this context. And he says, environment is the only source of life and nourishment. So service is inevitable. To sustain oneself, therefore be serviceable to make it healthy, wealthy, and vigorous in life. So collaboration is a great idea, but collaboration is inevitable. It is it is the truth. And when we realize the truth, and that becomes a conviction. And when we have that conviction drives our actions. So Thakur Kulchandra talks about interinterestedness. So the moment I realize that my interest lies in the interest of others in my environment, then it becomes my spontaneous, natural behavior to take care of others, to take care of them, to nourish them, to fulfill their interests. In the same vein, Sri Thakur is saying if every individual in a family takes care of the interest of every other individual, every family in our societies takes care of the interest of every other family. If every province in a country thinks about the interest of every other province, if every country in this world thinks about the interest of every other country, we don't have to worry about collaboration. So we don't have to worry about well-being and happiness in this world. So I think the most important thing, change does not happen overnight. Years of slavery, the rule of the external powers, especially in India, have led us to inferiority complex, have led us to cutthroat competition, have led us to material attachments and desires. But I think we'll have to go back. Charity begins at home. Parents will have to teach compassion to their children. Today they teach competition, they do comparison, but they have to teach compassion. They have to teach love. They have to teach to give. They have to teach the children to give to others. And that is the giving is the best way to get. The more we elevate others, the more elevated we become ourselves. And when you talk about this interinterestedness, how is that interestedness is possible? That is possible when we have a common interest, when you have a common living ideal, common master. When we talk about universal brotherhood, is it possible? It is possible only when we all believe in a universal fatherhood. If we do not believe in the universal supreme father, then universal brotherhood is a distant dream. So all of us need to be attached to that common ideal. And that attachment is the most important thing which will drive our actions. Compassion, and we all would believe that we are all extension of each other. And that is how the spirit of collaboration will extend to societies. Collaboration is a great idea, but a great idea is meaningless unless we follow a living ideal in whom all the ideas have been embodied. Principles are great, but if these principles do not center around a principle, and if all of us are not attached to that principle, we're not going to follow the principles. Like cigarette smoking is injurious to health, that's a great principle. But majority of people don't follow that. They don't care. But if they have a love center in their life, to make that love center happy, they can give up anything. Smoking is such a negligible small thing.
And even if you look at the world around us, the very living cell, right? There's a nucleus, electronic
Okay.
structure. If you look at the structure, right, of an atom, you will see that there's a nucleus. So everything for that matter is rotating around the center. And that is maybe why they're all in their positions, because there is a force which is keeping them attached to the center. And that is why it's so very important to have a center in our lives. And now, whatever you spoke about brings to mind a very viral post which is rocking the internet these days. It's about a culture in Africa called Ubuntu. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing it right, but it is something like this that one anthropologist visited a particular African village where African tribes reside. And he asked a group of children, he gave them a basket of fruits and said that whoever runs first uh, uh, gets that entire basket. What he noticed was really, really enchanting. He saw that all the children held their hands, each other's hands, and they ran together. Then they got the basket together and they shared all the fruits. And this is a culture in Ubuntu, and precisely the same thing which you are talking about, that whenever we speak about I, it is about we. So we and I, the spirit is the same. And maybe we are able to achieve it only through attachment to a supreme master, an ideal in our lives. And also, like whenever we speak about competition, Mr. Mahapatra, it is always brings to mind, we generally say, Darwin's survival of the fittest. And I was recently reading through it, some of the articles and books by social scientists these days. And what they're saying is Darwin's theory of survival of fittest is actually misinterpreted. It is actually survival of the kindest.
Very
Well, the
powerful.
law of natural selection tells us that a species which has more number of compassionate members is eventually that thrives, that survives. And Darwin himself said that sympathy is the greatest, strongest of all human emotions. So I thought since we are talking about this, and since compassion, love, sympathy is at the heart of collaboration, let me talk about it from theory of evolution, from the Darwinian theory, which we all speak about. So I think we are coming towards the end of our session. It's time for us to take some questions. I must thank my audience, our audience, who have joined us in our Facebook page, on our YouTube channel, and we are seeing some wonderful, encouraging comments coming from all of you. Thank you.
Yes.
And if you have any questions, please do feel free to post it in our page, and we will try our best to respond to it with whatever limited wisdom we have. May we have the questions on screen, please? Okay. One question we are seeing on screen by Mr. Saru. Mr. Mahapatra, it is for you, Mr. Mahapatra. Do you think educational assessment need to change from competition-based to aptitudinal and observational placement-based?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think some changes have been seen in the recent changes in the educational policy. Yes, I think it should foster not competition, but it should foster aspiration for excellence. So aptitudinal and observational placement is absolutely important. Before that, I think there's a fundamental challenge that we are seeing in the whole education deployment and assessment process is, I think Tanaya was talking about it, identifying the strength of each individual. I think when we look at our education system today, Einstein has given a great example. When we bring people in a classroom who have different instincts, different temperaments, different competencies, different natural proficiencies, etc. When we bring them on par and then try to put them in the same scale of competition or measurement, it becomes disaster. He says if you ask a fish, if you judge the ability of a fish to climb the tree, and the fish would live rest of its life believing that it is stupid. So I think what the education system and the assessment process, what it lacks today is looking at the distinctiveness of each individual, because each individual is unique, as Tanaya said some time back. We need to really understand that in that instinctive strength or distinctiveness, the specialities of each individual, enable each individual to excel in that specialty. And the assessment should be around that. Assessment should be around observation. It should be more aptitudinal. We should move away from by hearting concepts and reproducing an answer paper. That's not a very effective way. That's again driven by extrinsic motivation of getting good marks. I agree with you.
Absolutely. And another thing, the Mahapatra, which you spoke about, that it all begins from the home, right? Home. Our home is the center of education, actually, more than the school, maybe. And at our homes, and especially in our childhood, we have seen across that we teach our children, oh, don't show your copy to others. Uh, Try to hide things. You have to be the first,
True.
you have to have the first rank. So we are
Very true.
constantly creating comparisons with others. And that is why this child who has been taught that you are not supposed to show your copy to others, you are supposed to be the first in the class, then this child eventually grows up and he is suddenly put in an organization and asked, hey, you have to collaborate. All seems maybe Greek and Latin to him. He's not able to do it. So
Yes.
that's precisely the problem. Things are changing because I now see when my kid is studying, right, I see that some of the values are getting inculcated by the teachers themselves. That it's not about rank; it's about everybody helping each other out. So I thought I would I would add on to what he said, Mr. Muhammad. And Trishi Thakur himself, right, really talked about education system which is more based on observations. Right, you observe, you
Absolutely.
do those little experiments yourself, and the knowledge or the wisdom you gain out of it is actually a real education, and that eventually would get reflected in your behavior, in your habits, right? It's not only about marks. He says that if you are only good in your studies, it does not mean that you are educated or you are very high five. Your behavior, your habits
Yes.
should
Yes.
reflect what you have known. So I thought
You're
I would
right.
just add on to your thoughts.
He emphasized observation quite a lot, and then he said, through your observation, see the relationships between different components of an object, the relationship of that object with various other objects. Observe that and understand that. Very pertinently brought out.
And he envisioned that in every home there should be a laboratory, right? Where
Yes,
we do our little experiments. That's what he envisioned.
exactly.
Any other questions, please? Survival of the fittest versus all are fit to survive. Can you please emphasize?
Okay, so I can make an attempt. So
Yeah.
survival of the fittest is a myth, right? So I don't know how much time we have, but there was a very interesting story from the life of Sister Thakur and Kul Chandra. A bunch of devotees of Thakur went on a mission to um, propagate the ideology of brotherhood and love and compassion, the ideology of Sister Thakur in various parts of Bengal. And they were on that mission. When they were about to leave, Sister Thakur called them and told them, please take this young man who has come from a village, take that young man with you, and he should accompany you. The man looked very rustic. He seemed to be illiterate man from a village, and they were not very convinced about taking him with them. But their master, the spiritual master, has told them to take this person with them. So they had no option but to take him along with them. After a few days, they discovered that this man is not just from a village, not just illiterate, he is also a pickpocket because he was caught stealing money from the wallets of other members of the troop. They immediately threw him out. They said, get out of our group. They went on the mission, went to different villages for about 2 to 3 weeks, came back to the ashram after that, and they were very eager to describe to Sister Thakur about their experience. Sister Thakur was not very keen to listen to them. But after some time, Thakur asked him, where is Birju? Birju was the name of that young man. They were a little hesitant. They said, Thakur, we threw him out of our group. Thakur felt very sad and he looked very cheerless. His face turned pale and grim. And he said, you threw him out, but why? One of the devotees said, we did that because he was found to be a thief. Thakur said, you are on a mission to talk about my message of love, compassion, brotherhood to everybody. You could not adjust one human being with you, and you are talking about universal brotherhood. It has no meaning if you don't demonstrate that in your behavior and action. One of the devotees was little arrogant and he snapped a reply. He said, Thakur, survival of the fittest. That young man did not fit into our scheme of things. He was not fit enough to be with us. You know what Sisi Thakur said? Sisi Thakur said, survival of the fittest? I don't believe in this. Make the unfit fit, then only you will survive. Make the incapable capable, then only you will survive. Make the incompetent competent, then only you will survive. But if you think the environment around you is incompetent, unfit, and you will survive, that is impossible. And I think the second part of the question is survival of the fittest versus everybody is fit enough to survive. Yes, everybody has come with distinct, unique qualities. We need to encourage the exploration of those distinct qualities. Unless we do that, unless we encourage that, then we are going to kill the distinctiveness that people bring in. Everybody is in a journey. Somebody seems to be ahead in the journey, somebody seems to be behind. But everybody, depending on their own time and space, they're in that journey. So nobody is really fit or nobody unfit. Everybody is endowed with the qualities to survive and grow. Being and becoming, existence and growth are the innate desires of every creature.
Even our spiritual scriptures, they say that Aham Brahmasmi, we are but a part of the divine, which means that we are born with immense potential, indomitable spirit. Maybe we need to help each other out. And that is what Shishi Thakur has taught us to
Yes.
realize that potential within us. And he talks about that mastery has to awaken within. And this potential within us, I think, and this is my personal understanding, is that indomitable potential spirit that he's talking about.
Yes.
And we
So
really
that's a
need to help
profound
each other
understanding.
out.
Yes.
I'm not sure if we have another question to be asked. Yes, I think we have another question on the screen. Do you think that our shift of mindset from individual success to collective growth can keep competition at bay?
Yeah, I can take a shot at this question. Yes, I think this shift of mindset from individual success to collective growth is all about shifting from personal success to team or organizational objectives. I think then there is very little distinction because if organizations, teams have a shared vision, if they have a shared vision and everybody is going after that vision, which is common to all, then there is no distinction between individual success and group success. It was only all about collective success because my group's vision is also my vision. That's the shared vision. So that vision, so we need an attachment to that shared vision. And the attachment is the string. And what is larger than the vision is the love center. Because vision is again an idea, it is a concept. But when you have a true master in the form of in flesh and blood, that love center, who is the true teacher or guru, who embodies all visions, all ideas and principles, then I think that would be the greatest of all attachments. I think attachment to an idea is probably at the lowest level. Attachment to a larger purpose at vision is probably at the next level of evolution. But when you talk about attachment to an ideal, a living ideal, true master at love center is the highest form of attachment. And when a group of people or when all the people in societies are attached to that common living idea, then there is no conflict. because they go after a common, they are bound by common, ideal, and they're all bound together. In the solar system, all the planets run smoothly and they never come in the way of each other because they're attached to the sun. Imagine if that had that attachment with the sun not been there, they would have all been destroyed in no time. And the same thing applies to human life. If you're attached to a living ideal, then there is no distinction between um, uh, or individual mindset and collaborative mindset, because all of us have a common ideal that all of us are aspiring to fulfill.
Absolutely. So thank you so much, dear audience, for putting such beautiful questions which triggered our thought process, helped us learn. Thank you for all your lovely comments. Thank you for all your support, all your love that you are sharing on our initiative, Treadmill, the series of conversations. And my request to all of you would be, through your comments, please do let us know on which topics, on which themes you would like us to discuss in our upcoming conversations. And you know that, every month we have a conversation like this. So please do let us know on which topics and themes you would like us to have a conversation on. I think that would really, really help us. Share the Facebook page, the link of the Facebook page with your friends, with your families, and help us grow, help us reach people through you. Thank you so much. And let me summarize the discussion here today. So we started with understanding the psychology of competition and why actually we compete. We talked about in that in certain aspects, in certain situations, competition might be good, might drive excellence. Then we talked and we tried to understand, and since Mr. Mahapatra and I both come from the corporate world, we talked about how this competition plays out in the corporate, how it impacts. And then we tried to understand how collaboration helps, how collaboration is the way forward, and how we can actually collaborate on the ground. We talked about why it is difficult to collaborate, but then at the same time, we talked about that yes, it is possible. It is possible to inculcate the spirit of compassion in our hearts. And how we do that? We do that through attachment to a guru, to a spiritual master, to a living ideal who should be at the center of our lives and being. So thank you so much. And uh, as I right at the onset, I told that we indeed are passing through very, very tough times. Uh, so in these tough times, I think we should focus all our energies and efforts to helping people around us. We know we are maintaining social distancing. This is the buzzword, but then I think though we are maintaining social distancing, we should be emotionally, psychologically connected. So social distancing, but emotional proximity. We can call our people up, right? Our friends, family members, check on them, how they are doing. If they need any help, we can provide them. We can use our, whatever resources we have, we can use it. If we don't have resources, we can at least give them a ray of hope by talking to them, encourage them. So I leave you with this thought. And in the words of Sri Thakur himself, rely and you shall never be frightened. Encourage and try not to arouse fear. So pertinent in the current times. And he says, have patience, danger will be crossed over. Myself and Mr. Mahapatra, the entire team believes that yes, we shall cross over this pandemic, this troubled times, difficult times that we are seeing. Let us have the faith and we will emerge stronger out of it. Thank you all for joining in. Take care and stay safe. Thank you. We will meet next week. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.